All right. Today, I'm for the love of sports. My name is Michael Rasile. I have my man Josh Green on. He is a creative marketing and earned media specialist. He was a VP at Weber Shandwick. He worked at Catalyst PR, which turned into IMG, which turned into WME, and he even started his career as a sports TV reporter. Josh, how you doing today, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
No, the pleasure, I promise you, is all mine. We're going to have a lot of fun, especially towards the back half of this conversation. Very excited to talk about some of the stuff you did with the beer category and combining that with sports. But the first question I have for everybody, Josh, on For the Love of Sports is, why do you love sports so much?
So I grew up pretty much where sports was as close to being part of the DNA as possible. I grew up in the outskirts of Boston in the early 80s. So I remember just listening to Celtics broadcasts in my room as I fell asleep. Eventually, somehow, my dad stumbled his way into a partial season ticket share for the Celtics games, in the Larry Bird era. So for the bulk of the 80s, I would get to a handful of Celtics games and snuck into the NBA Finals in '84, Game 5, the famous Heat game where Kareem is taking oxygen on the sidelines. Went to Larry Bird's steal game against Isaiah in '87. So, and in '91, when Bird was concussed against the Pacers in Game 5, but still rebounded to lift the C's over the Pacers. So it was part of the DNA. My town actually also abuts Foxborough. So at the time, getting into the Patriots game was rather easy and ignominious. So we would literally listen to the game on the radio because it wasn't sold out. So the home games were blacked out. If you would believe that, for pretty much all of the 80s. So we would listen to the game, and if it was close, we'd just drive over to the stadium, and they would let you in for free in the second half. And it was just anything they could do to fill the stands, and we would take advantage.
Isn't it crazy how times have changed? Isn't it crazy, man?
No one believes that Patriots story, but I say for Jets fans and other long-suffering NFL fans, you never know when that time may come and fortunes may change.
You never know. I'm a Giants fan, so I just want to make sure that part is very
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, no, don't worry. I hate the Jets and the Patriots. I hate the Jets and the Patriots. So don't worry, I'm on your side some of the time. But no, it is funny. I always love talking to people that are a little older in Boston because, again, you had the Celtics at least growing up, right? But the Patriots, man, they're obviously cream of the crop when it comes to the NFL over the last 20 years. And the thing I love, I don't know how much you pay attention to Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a cool guy, but I always love when he's talking to younger Boston fans because he always talks about how the older Boston fans hate the younger Boston fans because they don't know what it was like. Tom Brady was there for 20 years. Tom Brady led them to 6 Super Bowls. They were one of the best teams in the league constantly. And then it's always just kind of funny because older Boston fans like yourself have to remind everybody they let us into the game for free. They blacked out the games because no one would show up to the stadium. Right. Like, it is just crazy how, as you said, you just never know what's around the corner.
It is crazy. I mean, the entire identity of a Boston sports fan, I cannot relate to anybody who's grown up in the past 20 years. There was just this definitely deep ingrained thought that we would never see a championship team after Bird retired. And that lived out and lived on for a long time. We thought Drew Bledsoe was the savior. Great player, but that's how desperate we were for someone who could lift us from last place in the division. Mm-hmm. And we were thrilled to have Drew. But yeah, fortunes have changed.
It is pretty crazy. And I guess, kudos to you guys. I'll take the 2 Giants championships without a doubt. It's okay. But
I was in the stadium for both of them.
Painful. No way.
Very painful. That's one of the perks of my last 2 tenures is that I do typically attend the Super Bowl. So I've seen multiple Patriots victories over the years, but 3 really tough losses, including the Eagles loss. But those Giants losses were devastating.
18-1. So we'll leave it there, man. I mean, you got to be it as an unbiased fan. If you can step back, that first game was incredible. The second one was weird, but that first game was just absolutely incredible. And, I'm happy it went my way. I watch it once every year, especially with the Giants being as bad as they've been recently. I go on to YouTube, watch the 2-hour-long commercial-free game, remember what it was like, shed a tear, and move on with my life from there.
So you upon further viewing, you definitely agree that Eli was in the grasp and the play should have been over, right? That's a clear takeaway.
Yes, and I think the 4 offensive holdings on that play also could have been called.
Exactly.
But everything after that, man,
Right.
like everything after that was pretty damn cool, if you ask me. And it was 3rd down; it wasn't 4th down. So worst comes to worst, he would have just done it the next play. But
you're right.
So with that, I mean, you know, we're talking about sports a little bit, and your career actually started as a sports reporter. So you were going to get, you know, you've been to multiple Super Bowls. I'm assuming in the beginning of your career, you thought it'd be on the sideline. You thought maybe you'd be sitting next to Joe Buck, right? Or next to Troy Aikman. So tell me what it was like and why you wanted to get in on that side of the business at first.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned in the opening anecdote about listening to Celtics games on the radio, one of the things I first connected with was play-by-play announcers. It was that, and also there were some legendary local sports broadcasters. So our version of the Len Berman or the Marv Albert were guys like Bob Lobel. If you look him up, he was someone who spent 30 years at the local NBC affiliate, but he became sort of the narrator and the guy who was our only way of getting the highlights and the post-game reactions from players. So I just loved the guys who could tell the story and bring the story to me. And that carried through when I went to college. I actually did play-by-play for the men's basketball team at Stanford for 2 years. So we traveled with the team, went to every game, flew with the entire entourage, and really got a taste of what it felt like to be a part of a team and sports sort of production. And then parlayed that into the local sports broadcasting. I did actually get a chance to cover the Super Bowl as a reporter. Yeah, I was working in Bakersfield, California in 2003, and that was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Raiders Super Bowl in San Diego. So John Gruden beats his old team. Terrible game. But I do recall it was one of those moments after the game. I'm literally standing right behind Peter King, waiting to go into the locker room of the Bucks. So that was pretty cool. A very jubilant Warren Sapp knocked me off my rocker as he paraded through the locker room. Very jubilant and very unclothed, but it was great.
That is awesome. I mean, how many Super Bowls have you been to?
11 or 12.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's in that range.
All right. Not that bad. Not that bad.
Very lucky.
I was going to say, what, like almost 20% of all Super Bowls you have seen, if my math is, very quick math is right. But good for you. I mean, obviously it's very interesting, just kind of the career arc and the career path. So you go to a Super Bowl, you're essentially, I mean, that is got to be one of the coolest things in the world, especially that early on in your career. I mean, if someone started, if in the beginning of your career, you're starting to get incredible things like going to the Super Bowl, it's going to be very hard for me to want to leave that job. Obviously, understanding this was, almost 20 years ago, this is a little different back then, and kind of how the internet really wasn't even anything close to what it is now, where you and I can have this conversation while during a pandemic. But what I guess, even with those amazing opportunities coming to you so early in your career, you ended up leaving and going into PR. And I know you told me already it was the storytelling aspect, but what exactly was it about not wanting to do and go through that incredible grind of being a sports reporter to make it to the top where Peter King is, even though you were standing right next to him? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think definitely, to put it in the proper context, it certainly was a different time. So 20 years ago, really, it was a much more fractured, contained, and linear path to the top. And along the way, a lot of people just would fall off that tree as they tried to climb it. So I had put in about 8 years as a broadcaster. And that Super Bowl in 2003, I began my career in early 97, my first on-air job in 97. So I had been in it for a while. I actually did interview at ESPN. I was a finalist for an ESPN anchor position in 2003. They brought 5 of us in on different days, and they told us up front, when I came in, they told me, we're bringing in 5 of you. We're going to hire 1. The rest of you might never get the shot again, and we don't know if
thanks, guys.
Exactly. They said, embrace this moment, embrace the fact that you're in the room right now. We recognize how hard it is, and you should feel good about that. But being here is no guarantee of future success, and just know that up front. So they're very candid. And that was my experience. I wound up not getting the position.
Who did get that position? Because I think you know exactly who it is, right?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Steve Bunin, who spent a long time actually at the mothership. I think he was an anchor for about 10 years. And if I remember correctly, not that I'm stalking his career or doing anything untoward, but I think he's at Fox Sports Southwest, somewhere in Texas, doing broadcasting still. From what I heard, really nice guy and talented. And they took him for that position. But I put in about another year and a half after that, grinding, trying to find a spot. And I wasn't finding the right fit. And even 8 years in, I'm making $24,000 a year. I'm working nights and weekends. Just started to have those conversations with yourself about what the future really is and what you value in terms of what's possible and life choices.
And so, again, I think the shout out Steve Bunin. I hope he's doing well, but we'll be paying attention to him. Don't worry. I promise everybody out there that. And so with that, like how do you come to terms with something like that? You put in so much time, so much effort and energy. You said all these nights and weekends, you got to go to a Super Bowl already. Like how do these conversations start happening? And at what point did you kind of come to the realization like, all right, I can storytell in another way that would probably allow me to make more money and do cooler things, such as go to, I don't know, 11 other Super Bowls. But like, how do those conversations internally start happening?
They started to naturally evolve. I actually was up for a position in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I was offered the job as I think the number 3 sports reporter for the CBS station there. So again, it wasn't a real glory position, but I went there. As I'm leaving, they pretty much indicated that I was going to get the job. And I'm flying home from Knoxville to Bakersfield, California. That's about a 4-stop flight, 4 connections, right? That's a full day of navigating travel. And I was just at the airport on the way back, and I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't excited about the potential to uproot and once again move across the country and go to Knoxville. I was grateful for the chance, but again, I thought I was going to be signing up for another 3 years of financial struggle, and maybe getting that shot at the big time that I craved. So without putting any undue pressure in what was going through my head, I just knew that at that time I had the realization that let's explore something new and think about other ways you can find fulfillment and maybe add a little bit of normalcy to a life pattern and start to have some of those things that you also want out of your life.
And so with you being on the media side and the reporting side, how easy was it to kind of sit on the other side of the table? How often does that transition happen? As you said, a lot of people are falling off that tree when they're climbing to the top and they have to go somewhere. And you put in 8 years in the media. So it's not like you can just go into any market and be like, well, hey, I've been a professional for 8 years. You should hire me at this amount of money and I should do this job. So how does that transition from media to public relations and marketing that allows you to not just start completely entry level again? Because, we all, the 30-year-old guy at the entry level job is, again, you need to make money. You got to do your thing, support your family. So how does that transition happen, I guess?
It was a combination of all these things that you've brought up. It was definitely a curiosity when I would interview people. They value that skill, easily translatable. And clearly I saw that as soon as I made that career shift. I was able to really have an appreciation for how we're talking to the media from an agency or brand standpoint. But I did have to accept positions that, most 30-year-olds were not accepting. It wasn't entry level, but it wasn't where I expected to be. But I think the experience definitely got me in the door, gave me credibility, allowed me to establish myself. And from there, naturally demonstrated that link. I think it's very translatable and very applicable. And it became a pretty clear way of how I approached the job. I leaned on my experience a lot and still do. And that I do think clients saw value in that. I had a lot of friends in the media just who were casual friends that allowed me to make more contacts and get my clients in front of media. But just the sensibility of what was a good story versus what was a brand trying to fit in an awkward way and trying too hard.
Yeah, and that's kind of something the media side would probably, it was very evident and very clear to you
Right.
coming. It's like, oh gosh, guys, come on. This is authenticity is number one. And if it's not authentic, we can all see it, smell it, feel it, taste it. It's pretty obvious. So with that, I know you had a couple jobs along the way, but I think your first big job, if I'm not mistaken, came with Catalyst, which eventually then turned into IMG, very, very well-known agency, which then eventually turned into WME, another very, very well-known agency. And you got, like, first off, the M&A part of it, how frustrating and annoying is that process? I've personally never been through it, but I mean, just multiple ones going from one gigantic agency to another. Like, how did you deal with that, especially kind of early on in your second career?
Yeah, you really do have to rely on leadership and the folks who are shepherding that kind of transition. I think a lot of the tone is set by them, because the first thing you hear about someone who you don't know, a company you're not really familiar with, is coming in and taking over, you assume the worst, and
Hmm.
you certainly know that those cases often wind up with people being let go. Um, in my case, that didn't happen. Those transitions were, I mean, fairly seamless, but also they felt really complementary. When IMG acquired Catalyst, IMG was adding this PR specialty that they did not have internally. So it became an asset for them to pitch that, hey, we now have this capability. We have sports PR experts that now can be part of
Hmm.
what you're already doing with IMG. So they saw us as a real value, and that came through. I think the folks that took over our unit, the IMG consulting branch, absorbed us. Those guys are great. David Aberton, who was really a titan in the sports industry, he was someone who made us feel comfortable. And my boss, Brett Werner, who's over at MWW right now, he leads that agency. Brett founded Catalyst with a few others, and he made sure that the transition was also smooth. So I think just trusting your leadership was the lesson that I learned, and that maintained throughout.
And what's it like from the client perspective, right? Because you assume the worst, which is probably, hey, I might lose my job. But how do you kind of not allow that negative energy to then go from you to the clients, because
Right.
they need to be happy and understanding through this whole process as well? Because if you lose them, then you probably really do lose your job at that point.
That is true. I think client relationships work best when they're very personal. So the first thing you do is let them know that it's still the same team. So the same faces and names that you were talking to before are the same people who will be handling your business moving forward. The upside is that they have access to more things should they want them, should they want some of the benefits of a large agency like IMG or WME, and maybe make some more inroads in entertainment or other WME properties, for example. That's available. But at the core, it's the same group of folks doing the same work on an individual level.
Mhm. And that makes sense. Again, just kind of making sure that everyone understands. Business card might look a little different, but it's still
Right.
me. I'm still Josh Green. I'm still here
Right.
for you. So I think that part is very important. And so at this, I'm going to call it one company, because at this stop,
Sure.
there we go.
Yeah.
At this stop in your career, there were a couple really interesting companies you were able to work with: Under Armour as well as Timex. I saw were a couple. I mean, Under Armour, I wore, where am I? I wore this side.
Love
Wore
it.
it for you today, just to let you know. I mean, got to represent the brand. And so with working with so many different companies in that agency format, I'm sure it's a lot more interesting, because you can kind of do a lot of different things at once. But how do you almost compartmentalize? Because the market for Timex is a little different than the market for Under Armour. But in this case, we're still utilizing sports and we're still utilizing the PR aspect of it. So how do you kind of differentiate and make sure you can kind of shut one part of your brain off to turn the other part on?
I do think that's what most agency folks will tell you, in terms of the big difference between working on the client side and the agency side is exactly that. The fact that you're working with multiple brands, and it keeps the excitement level there in the sense that you are switching your brain a little bit from client to client. I think on the agency side, you're so laser focused on the singular brand mission and narrative that you tend to exist in a bit of a bubble, which can be fine, and a lot of people excel in that role. Agency just opens that up and allows you to feel fresh, and I actually like that. It did keep me challenged, but also exposed me to different things, and it add a little variety to the day.
Yeah, right. I mean, it gets kind of boring doing the same thing over and over again. So now this way you're able to be a little bit more creative in a little different ways. And one thing I've always
Correct.
read, at least in marketing specifically, is learning what other industries and what other companies are doing, even if they have nothing to do with you. You can still probably pull one or two things away that then allows you to utilize that at what you're doing. So again, at the agency side, on the agency side, you're able to kind of look at these two different things. So with that, like, how did you go about utilizing your network and your relationship within both of these two major brands they're both very ingrained in the sport? Under Armour, I think, is much more obvious, but Timex, if I'm not mistaken, they sponsor a lot and they partner with a lot of different leagues and teams and players to get their message and to get their amplification out there. How do you kind of go about those two different companies specifically from your experiences?
So when I joined Catalyst initially, and this is the end of 2008, really Under Armour was just coming onto the scene. So it's
Mm-hmm.
clearly a growth brand. Their mission is trying to gain awareness and be the disruptor in the sports category. And we were on this rocket ship of a growth trajectory with them. So that kind of framed the way we did things a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times, was the fact that this is the hottest brand going, and we were at the very beginning of that acceleration. So as they entered a new sport, we were just busting through the doors. Hey, we're football. Now we're making running shoes. Now we're in basketball. Now we're going to dominate golf with Jordan Spieth and Star Apparel. So I think just the life cycle of the company led itself to so many exciting opportunities that we took advantage of. I think for me, the most natural thing was that obviously football is part of Under Armour's
Mm-hmm.
DNA. So initially, I'm going right out to the NFL Combine and the Senior Bowl, and I'm seeing people that I know. I'm seeing people
Yeah.
in the media who are peers, and that just, again, adds credibility with the client, but also makes it easier for me to get my sea legs
Mm-hmm.
and to make that transition. But yeah, I mean, Under Armour was a wild ride, and really got to see it from the ground floor. Timex was a brand that needed to reinvigorate itself, so it wasn't as much about coming in and blowing the doors off with
Mm-hmm.
Timex. It was making people remember why they felt good about it, and it was almost more of a nostalgic approach to them, while still having credibility as a modern brand. And they were also, distance running was really their core specialty in terms of athlete partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
So, from distance running to triathlons and the Ironman, it was a different audience, and just the way that particular fan base spoke to each other,
Mm-hmm.
you could see the differences versus the NFL or an NBA fan that was rapidly becoming a fan of Under Armour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's definitely, especially Under Armour in 2008, as you said, it's rocket ship at that point in time. It's actually really interesting. I had Rob Narvez on.
Oh
He was
yeah,
at Under Armour for, I think, during that same time you were
yeah.
helping them out. So he was awesome. He's got some great stories too. So if you haven't already, everybody listening, go check out his episode. And then you bring up the Iron Man. I spoke with Bob Babbitt recently of Bob Babbittville, and he's been doing the Iron Man thing since the late 70s. I think he did the third one out in Oahu. I think could get the city wrong in Hawaii, but absolutely loved it. He's super cool dude. He was a lot of fun as well. And yeah, just talk. He definitely had a little bit of a different attitude than Rob did. Both very, very good people. Don't get me wrong. Definitely a little different on the conversational spectrum. But I know while you were at, I don't know exactly which company it was at this point, during this stop, 2014, the Winter Olympics, you won an award for something about crisis, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I saw those words in really big letters and I was like, oh no, kind of got to ask about this one, because you did something good in a really bad time. So if you don't mind telling us, with the Olympics very important to me as well, tell us a little bit about what happened in 2014 and how you were able to spin that in the right direction.
Yeah, so this is 2014 in Sochi, and the big moment there, as far as Under Armour was concerned, was they were the official partner of the U.S. speed skating team, and the team was posting some disappointing times throughout the early parts of the competition in the Olympics, and there was some thought among team members that the new Under Armour suits that they were wearing might be contributing to that. Not the thing a brand wants to hear, but really That's where I saw my client at their best in terms of transparency, accountability, action, and really that award is in conjunction with the client, their leadership, which I folded into and try to contribute to, was just getting the athletes through that experience and doing everything that we could to be advocates for them. So it got pretty ugly in terms of the way the athletes were speaking, and just literally they were cutting their own holes in the uniforms to see if maybe there was a drag effect that somehow the uniforms were inadvertently creating. They were musing openly about using older uniforms in competition, despite what had been approved. And the thing that Under Armour established really right away, and it came from Kevin Plank, the founder, was we are never going to go against the athletes. We will always support them, whatever they want, no matter how it reflects on us as a company. And if it makes us look bad in the short term, we serve them. Athletes are our currency. Improving athlete performance is our mission, and we will do whatever it takes to do that. So we just had to navigate that actual communications crisis. So this was leading the international news on a daily basis about the athlete's performance. As it turned out, one of the factors was that in the lead up to the Olympics, the athletes had done all their training at high elevation. And Sochi is a rare Winter Olympics location that is at sea level. So the ice surface in Sochi was completely different, and the atmospheric conditions were completely different than the training atmosphere that the athletes had been involved with in the lead up. So they had never really conducted the full training sessions that they normally would for an Olympics, mirroring the conditions of the actual Olympic Games. And I think the unfamiliarity with the track maybe led to some of their strategies not being what they thought they were. So ultimately, Under Armour agreed, change uniforms, go back to what you're comfortable with. And they still posted times that were a little slower than they had expected. And really, I was working directly with U.S. Speed Skating, with the commissioner there, with some of the other Olympic entities, and of course Under Armour, to just make sure that, hey, listen, we're here for the athletes, but we also want to be transparent about what the truth is. And we just did that. But I think the fact that the willingness to put ourselves out there was what contributed to all of us collectively winning that award, to navigate through something that was impacting stock prices, really leading to the most critical press that Under Armour had received, it probably since its inception, and just making sure that, hey, we're going to get through this by doing what we believe in.
And I think it's great, as you said, we at Under Armour, athletes are the currency. I love how you said that, because it's so true, right? If athletes are refusing to use your product, why would anybody like myself, who I'm not a long distance runner, but it's good to go outside and go for a run every once in a while. I'm not going to use Under Armour if the athletes that need to use it can't. And so how do you, as you said, it was, you get that award for navigating that space. How do you have those conversations though? And how do you kind of let as you said, we're supporting the athletes, go back to your old uniforms, do whatever the heck you need to do. But how do you make sure that, hey, like, this isn't us though? This is kind of their fault. And how do you do that in an elegant enough way that people are like, oh, okay, so they just didn't do the right thing, so it's not Under Armour's fault, and now the athletes aren't. Like, there's so many different ways you can come out and be angry about it, and that's going to make you look worse, even though you were right. So how did you go about making sure that you were navigating the space in the best possible way?
Yeah, I think, and I've learned a lot more about crisis communications and the experience there more holistically over the years as well. It really is accountability and transparency. You have to talk truthfully to your partners, and you have to understand what's really happening. And no one benefits from people running away from the truth, or being too scared to disclose the truth. So it's just establishing that up front, that, hey, we're going to do everything we can to help you, but we're also going to be truthful together, and we're going to give you the tools. Like, what we want most is for you to succeed as an athlete. That's it. And I think that's just how the tone is set.
And I think even to throw on top of it, you even brought it up with the stock price, right? You're a publicly traded company, and this
Yes.
is the Winter Olympics. So, only, I don't know, give or take 2 billion people were able to watch it or something. 2 billion people did watch it. How, again, understanding that you want to get out there quickly and be like, hey, it's not our fault. So do you have USA Speed Skating come out and be like, hey, it actually isn't the uniforms. Under Armour's doing a great job, and that's where Under Armour can then come in and say, but we're still here to support. Like how do you make sure that multiple people don't lose their job and the stock price doesn't tank?
Sure. So we certainly worked on the communication side of it quite diligently every day, and we had joint statements with USA Speed Skating.
There we go.
With the other entities. So working directly with those communication folks with input from the athletes. We wanted to make sure it never felt like a blame game. It wasn't. Transparency was not to say, hey, listen, we did everything right, this is on you. It was just more of, here's the science of the suits. They have been rigorously tested. That's indisputable. That said, if an athlete doesn't feel right, hey, we're working right now to fix it. It became very forward-looking, even in current time. Even on a day-to-day level, it was, okay, here's what's happening today. Here's how we're going to help athletes today, tomorrow, and for the rest of the competition. And reached a solution that the athletes felt, that they wanted and they felt comfortable with, and we were there to support them. But even in, there was no end zone spiking celebrations of, hey, listen, it's not our fault. No, it's always, there's always responsibility. If your athlete partner doesn't perform, you take that hit because you're invested in them emotionally and financially.
Accountability. It is very, very important, and understanding that, hey, we might not be responsible for it, but we'll be accountable for it.
Correct.
And making sure we're doing everything that we possibly can. And I think that's a great way to go about it. And you know what? If I had a vote, Josh, I think I would have voted for you too. So kudos to you and your team over there, obviously Under Armour, and taking that up. So now let's talk about the fun stuff. Sure. So you move on from WME. I think that's where we're at right now. You move on to Weber Shandwick. Great name, by the way. Really great name, by the way. And so with that, I mean, one of the opportunities, one of the brands, one of the companies you got to work with was AB InBev. So in case anybody, I don't think I said it yet, but I will say it, AB InBev. So you have Bud Light, you have Mick Ultra, you have Stella, I really love 2 of those. Can't stand Mick Ultra, but it is for, whoever it is for, and they do their thing.
Fastest growing beer brand in the country, my friend.
And that's fine. More power to them, man. I know a lot of people that drink it. If I'm handed one, believe me, I'm going to drink it, but I'm more of a Bud.
You're a fitness-minded guy.
I'm more of a Bud Light guy. Let's be honest. I'll be honest with myself and with you, Josh. Don't worry.
Fair enough.
But combining beer and sports, I mean, that's just got to be the best job in the world, right? Like how did the 2 things not go more hand in hand than, hey, you want to watch the game? Sure, I'll bring a 6-pack, right? Like, it's so perfect. How much fun was it working with this type of company?
That was great. I mean, you couldn't find a better connection. Not only was it inherently a great match, but the fact that AB InBev are such savvy, enthusiastic marketers, and their willingness to do anything, really, it set up the table pretty well. And after a couple years in, some of my closest collaborators and we just found this sweet spot, and we ran with it. And the client kept pushing us in that direction and kept going for it. And it was it was exhilarating and liberating. And from a creative aspect, just you couldn't ask for anything more in terms of opening up the aperture of your mind, and whatever was spit out.
Yep.
Hey, you know what? Maybe it's not that crazy.
Try it. Yeah, let's try it. I do love it. And so during the whole Dilly Dilly craze a couple of years ago, still say it every once in a while when we're at parties, don't worry. The Philly came out. So as I said before, I'm not a very big fan of the Eagles, but every time for the last 2 years that I've driven into Philadelphia, that sign is still there. Yeah. So I hope you're getting paid every time someone sees it. I don't know, penny here, penny there. There's enough people on 95. How easy was that one, right? Especially with the Philly special and everything ongoing there. How easy was that connection with the Dilly Dilly and them winning the Super Bowl, unfortunately, against your Patriots? So just wanted to remind you one more time. But what was that like? And again, who just was like, why don't we just say Philly? Like how awesome is that?
So we're going to get into some element of the secret sauce here, which you're probing towards. But on one hand, it's really obvious and really easy, right? and you set yourself up to be able to take advantage of those sort of things. But the genesis of that entire connection was just the fact that really one of my buddies over at Weber Shandwick was just monitoring conversations of Eagles fans on social media so closely. And he noticed that Lane Johnson happened to say in a random training camp practice, hey, you know what? If we win the Super Bowl, I'm going to buy the entire city a beer. So a throwaway line, but we were listening closely enough to take advantage of that. So we immediately tweeted at Lane, you know what? If you win it, the beer's on us. Philly, Philly. So it was there in the universe and so easy to connect the dots, but we needed a spark, and the spark was Lane, and the other spark was us paying attention. So you have to plan far ahead enough to know who you are as a brand, but you have to be nimble enough to act when the opportunity is there and to pounce on it, as I'm sure Gary V and others would tell you. But that's how Philly was born, and we just kept it alive. And at the time, the Eagles were a 50-1 shot to win the Super Bowl going into the season. And then Carson Wentz goes down in December. And part of us was like, phew, we're off the hook. But then they kept winning and we rallied behind it. So along the way, we figured out how to raise the stakes, how to be a part of the send-off to the Super Bowl, how to be a part of the parade itself, and how to make that parade day just a totally Bud Light owned Philly sub-branded day. But it all began with that spark. If we weren't paying attention, this never would have happened.
Yeah, and I think it's paying attention. I think that's so important, especially from the public relations side, being from the media side yourself, and really understanding how those conversations come about, and authentically being like, yeah, shoot, beer's on us. We are Bud Light, right? We're only like the partner of the NFL in some capacity. But I think it is great that you said, it's the paying attention aspect, because I'm sure there's a lot of things that get said and people just kind of, as you said, it's a throwaway line and no one cares. But it can spark a little bit of a conversation and get that kind of started up. And as you said, I mean, they were 50-1. You guys could have taken that bet, then hedged along the way, and you could have made your money in some capacity. And you guys obviously did. But I think it's just so fantastic. Just want to remind everyone, the Falcons did have first and goal from the 2. We're not able to punch it in. The Eagles ended up winning. I think that's the wild card, right? The divisional round. Yeah. That one made me pretty angry. But I do love the campaign. And so when speaking with, the team at Bud Light, I'm assuming, either the Eagles or the NFL has to be in there in some capacity. Like, how do you pitch something like that? Guys, we got it. Yeah. Philly. It's like, what are you talking? Like, how do you then go about giving that to your partners and not making it sound just like, the name of the city? We're going to say it twice. You know what I mean? Like, how do you make it so it's enticing and people actually are going to be like, oh, wait, that is a good idea.
Yeah, I know it sounds trite perhaps, but man, it's that trust in your partners. They know where our heads are at. We know where their heads are at. And we also know that we're comfortable enough working with their other agencies and giving them credit. I mean, White and Kennedy came up with the Dilly Dilly campaign. We're just living off of their brilliance there, and help fuel Philly along the way with us with the incredible creative that they produced. But it's the fact that we're in the same room with these guys all the time, and we're constantly throwing that stuff out, and we know what's crazy and what's not. But we also know that sort of the saying within a lot of agencies and also within AB is, hey, give us a bunch of ideas that are going to work, and then give us one idea that would get you fired. And so it's like, it's the invitation to push the envelope.
I like that. And shout out to them. It sounds like, again, combining beer and sports, it just does not sound like it can get any better than that. I know Bud Light, some people are snobs about it, but it's my favorite, man. It's just the best. There's something about it that's just the best, and I do love it. So now I don't want to talk about the Eagles anymore. We can get out of Philadelphia, thankfully. Let's go to Cleveland. This story is fantastic. As I told you before, I called my buddy up before this. He's working from home, so don't worry, anybody out there listening. It's not a big deal. Shout out to my good buddy, Derek Rampula. He's going to be in my wedding. So him and his wife will be out here pretty soon, too. So in Cleveland, the 2018 season, correct? This is the 2018 season. 2017, the Browns don't win a single game.
0-16.
It was pretty sad. you guys came up with the idea for the victory fridge. I have a picture with the victory fridge. It was a stop along the way that we had to go to when I went to Cleveland. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was somewhere in the preseason. It started to get talked about, and then they were implemented into bars. So again, I called my friend. I was like, hey man, like, what do you remember like this? He said, when they got implemented, they would only go to bars that had the victory fridge because they knew there was a chance one day that they'd be able to open it up and drink a free beer, which I think so. Whatever you guys did, it was incredible. How does this idea come about? The Bud Light victory fridge, knowing that the Browns just went 0-16. It's like first victory. All right, you guys can open it up. Everyone has a beer on us. How is this the one idea that's going to get you fired?
That one actually, no, that was just a magical great idea. that wasn't going to get us fired.
No,
no, it's another example of preparation and paying attention. So one exercise that I really emphasized with my team was going into each NFL season. Let's map out what we feel like the big fan-oriented storylines might be. So we just plot them out like you would see on any kind of whiteboard or diagram. And we just figured, okay, like which of these 5 teams feel like they might do something kind of cool or different? Which fan base do we particularly love? You sort of see the same ones pop up here and there, but you also want to.
I'm sorry, I need to stop you there. One thing a team might do that's cool is the Browns will win a game. Let's just. I love how you put that very lightly, but I wanted to kind of make it a little more blunt.
So you begin that exercise with all these lofty aspirations for these teams, and you wind up with, well, there's also this one story in Cleveland. So we had them in our broad map of what the season could look like for Bud Light in an activation and marketing standpoint. And as we were presenting that to the client, he's like, I just got off the phone with the Browns, and we were at a summit last week, and they're kind of frisky. They're feeling like, let's lean into 0-16 a little bit. And so it snowballed. And he's like, why don't you come back, and what do you got for 0-16? And we had 3 or 4 ideas, and I got to give credit to my good friend, Jason Bellinger, who's still at Weber Shandwick, a brilliant kind of twisted mind, also a Bostonian, so good stock. But he really had that initial spark, and he and I kind of massaged it and built it into what it became as a full idea. And next thing you know, I'm on a plane to Cleveland presenting to the CMO of the Browns with the client about this idea. And the CMO began that meeting with the license of, hey, you know what? We're not going to run away for 0-16. We have to own it. So let's do it. And that's how it began. Then it was 3 months of incredible execution planning by our full team and our client. And you see that, I think that's where you see AB InBev really shine from an operations standpoint. What they can do, how they can activate on the ground is beyond anything I've ever seen. And the deliveries of the fridges and the stocking them and making sure that everything was lining up with the bars, they got that stuff under control, and it just allows us to focus on the creative and the media side of it.
And it was very creative, to say the least. And I think it's also a testament to the NFL, right? This doesn't happen. You don't get the incredible response you do if it's not the NFL, because the NFL, while there's 32 teams, meaning there's, 20 whatever cities or 30 cities, however it may be, the Browns are relevant on a national stage because it's the NFL, because there's only 16 games a year, and you guys are able to create something like this and run with it, which I think is incredible, because again, here in New Jersey, we cared about it. We were all rooting. We have 2 friends that live in Cleveland, more now because we go there occasionally, and we were all rooting for them. I think I told you I was actually in Cleveland the second week of the year when they played the Saints. And if I'm not mistaken, they tied or they lost on a last-second field goal. We were so excited. We were there. We thought it was going to happen with us there. Unfortunately, it did not, because the Browns are still the Browns. Never forget that. Take the under. Absolutely take the under because of the Browns. But it was so funny when we were there in the city, and it was literally a stop. My buddy's like, all right, you're here. It's a Thursday night. We got to go to this bar because they have a victory fridge. And it was that organic. That was the craziest part to me. So did you think it was going to turn into what it did?
We didn't really, you never know. You just hope that it would. But we saw pretty quickly the potential. And we were a bit blown away by that and also a bit frightened by it. Yeah, so obviously, so they tied their first 2 games of the season. Like, who begins the season with 2 ties? It never happens. And immediately we had to reinforce that this was not a tie fridge. It's a victory fridge. So yeah, ties don't count. So I don't want to spook you out with your wedding coming up, but I remember week 2, I was at my cousin's wedding. I actually officiated that wedding. I was the officiant. The wedding itself was on a Sunday for week 2. And the entire time, obviously, my focus is on the wedding, but my phone is blowing up like this is going to happen. And I'm like, no, please not this week. Please wait till week 3. And then week 3 was a Thursday game against the Jets. We always thought that might be the first game where they had a legit shot. They opened with Pittsburgh and New Orleans, so we thought they'd probably go 0-2. But the Jets gave them a shot. So I was in Cleveland for that game. I went to the game, and then, which, by the way, Jets were winning at the half, and the
Baker comes in. Yep.
It's getting a little, like, the fans are getting a little restless. You could see, like, hey, if we lose to the Jets, are we going to get a win? And Baker comes in, and then the rest is history. Then I hightailed over to the Barley House bar downtown, and that scene was just unbelievable. The place is shaking. Everybody's chanting at the fridge that's sitting right there in the front of the bar. Every TV crew in the city is there. We're funneling photos wherever we can. No one has cell service. We're getting bodied every direction. But you know what? When the beer came out, it was actually pretty orderly, and it was.
That's nice.
It's great. Yeah, it's great. I think of all cities who can just do that in a very respectful fashion, and thank God for the folks of Cleveland. Maybe not Philly, New York, or Boston would react in the same way.
No, far from it. And that's the thing. Cleveland always gets a bad rap. I go there once a year. I love the place. It's incredible. And one thing I can say is in my opinion, at least all the cities that I've been to, there isn't a more organic, again, going back to that word, an organic city that loves beer as much as they do. That is one thing I will say. They're great at drinking. A lot of talent there that they can put it away. So I think, again, it's just that it's the leaning into the 0-16. It's the, hey, we don't really know when they're going to win. Hey, this city loves to drink. Let's give them something extra to do. How long, at what point is it diminishing returns though? Were you worried that if they lost to the Jets and it's like week 10, it's like, all right, victory fridge, like we get it. Like now this is kind of us like kind of poking and prodding them every week. So was hoping, understanding that you wanted it to go for a period of time, but at what point would it have been like kind of uncomfortable for you guys, especially if they went 0-16 again? I mean, that's a whole nother story, but week 12, week 13, that probably would have got real like,
Yep. I think week 4. No, we had those discussions a lot internally. So again, as you said, I think every great idea comes from somebody willing to take some kind of risk. Our job is often to accept that risk, but mitigate it and anticipate it. So we did know that it could really lead down a dark spiral for the fan base. So the first thing was beer. The life cycle of beer is about 28 days. So beers in the fridge would have to be recycled once a month. So we thought, okay, at least if it goes 4 weeks, we can do a fun show of taking out the beer, putting in new beer.
Okay.
The grand locking and unlocking under supervision of the beers.
Like Stanley Cup, they have their white gloves on and everything. Yeah, that would have been fun.
Respect the beer. So that would have been fun. It would have been less fun doing it a second time. But I think that the idea came from keeping the fans first and celebrating fandom. It was never meant to make fun of those guys, so it had to stay positive. And we had thoughts about how we could at least try to reward and celebrate fans along the way if the team didn't come through and put those into motion. But we didn't want that. We really wanted them to win as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And yeah, again, it's almost kind of like you're mocking them. Again, it's week 12, 13. It's like, yeah, we get it. It's a victory fridge and we haven't won in 30 whatever games at this point. Not a great look for Bud Light. And it's kind of, that whole like die a hero, live long enough to see yourself become a villain kind of thing where the media would have been great in the beginning and towards the end, it might not have been that fantastic. And so you said Bud Light is fantastic. AB InBev is awesome to work with because of the implementation. And I know, if I'm not mistaken, there was kind of someone on the trigger where when they did win, all the fridges unlocked, if I'm not mistaken. So what is it like from your standpoint on the media side, trying to implement this idea into letting people, again, it's in Cleveland, but this is a national phenomenon for the first 3 or 4 weeks, potentially 3 or 4 weeks of the season?
Yeah. Again, it's due to a great team that's prepared and diligent. So we collected assets along the way, photos, video assets of the delivery, just some access to some super fans, and made sure we're seeding that out to media. But I will say the most successful unanticipated element of it was we just said, hey, on a lark, who are some of the most well-known Browns fans that are sprinkled across the country, just relocated? We thought of former players like Joe Thomas, Andrew Hawkins, guys with good platforms. But we also thought of the wrestler, The Miz. And I'm not a huge WWE guy, but those that are were like, yeah, this guy, like former champion, people love him. He's from Cleveland. And that was part of his identity. Lives in Austin now. So by working with the Browns, we're like, hey, listen, like, do you mind if can you help us contact The Miz and send him a fridge at his house? And we did. And he taped his own video of him watching the game in anticipation, screaming at the fridge to open. And then it did open remotely. Yes, it was a remote Wi-Fi trigger. So he posts a video of him at his home, and you see the chains come down, and he rejoices in full throat. And like that became like the most viral element of the entire thing, was super fan just being a fan. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, you just try to push as many right buttons as possible, and feed and seed as many assets as you can to media. So always be in conversation with them. We were capturing photos in real time from the bar. We had a photo crew there. We had a video crew there. All that stuff is going out as fast as it can at 3 a.m. after the game. And morning shows utilized it, and other national media utilized it. So it was worth it.
It is awesome. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a Thursday night game, right?
It was.
So that gave it like everyone in the NFL, there's only one game on. What game were you watching, right? It's one thing if it's Sunday at 1:00, but I think it's
Correct.
even cooler that it was Thursday night. Then you can kind of see the pictures of Cleveland really getting at it that Thursday night. How many people didn't go to work the next day because they got so much free Bud Light? Shout out them. So I do love it. I just think it's such a cool opportunity, and I think you guys absolutely killed it. I mean, how hard is it to say like, hey, you guys win a game, we give you free beer? But it's the way you did it and the way you went about it, I think, again, is just so cool. So you're no longer with Weber Shandwick. You have started your own thing. You're doing a little consulting now, doing your own thing, as I said a little bit earlier. So what are you doing, and how are you taking all these incredible ideas that are up in your brain and helping others, be able to help themselves, essentially, to kind of create their own ideas and do their own thing, so that way Bud Light might come calling to them with the victory fridge in the future?
Yeah, I think one of the great things about working for large agencies and working for mega clients is the force of the infrastructure behind you and the people you get to work with, and all of that is incredibly rewarding. But on some level, I wondered if there was a way for me to get closer directly to content creators, to lower level athletes, to maybe teams who don't have the ability to tap into a Bud Light at the expense and level that NFL teams do. And I thought that I could offer that resource individually to these people. And so that's what I've embarked on, was sort of this individual consultant to help personalities really establish what they stand for as individuals, figure out brands they like, brands who match up with their own values, and see if I could be the spark to pair them and make them attractive to those brand partnerships. And the team level, really understanding that, hey, listen, probably in your organization, you don't have someone who's dedicating all this time for creative marketing thoughts and how do we engage fans in a totally different way. What if we partnered and you just, at an individual level, I gave you that kind of thinking? So that was the impetus. I love being a little closer directly to those folks. And while the buffer of large agencies and large clients gives you great assets, it also makes you maybe 1 or 2 degrees removed sometimes directly from having an impact with the athletes or the creators themselves.
I think it's awesome, man. And just being able to kind of, roll your sleeves up a little bit more, for lack
Yeah.
of a better term, and really help. It's one thing to help the Eagles or the Cleveland Browns. I think they're going to be fine no matter what,
Right.
considering, they're part of the machine that is the NFL. But it's kind of cool that you're able now to kind of look and help some of these littler guys, for lack of a better term, these littler guys and girls who are doing this out of passion, doing it out of love. They're not making the millions and billions of dollars that the NFL comes with, but you're still able to lend those expertise where you can kind of lean back and say, hey, Under Armour, yeah, I was there for a couple years. I might have helped them do a couple things. That Bud Light fridge, you want to talk about it for 15 minutes? Because it's a pretty cool conversation. So I think it is awesome. And so with this new venture that you have, like what types of people, what types of clients? I know you said a little bit smaller, but who are you really going after, and how are you finding these relationships and new clients to allow your expertise to really shine?
Yeah. Leaning on my network of professional friends, which I think has been invaluable in normal times, but also now that we're all so separated physically, that really rises to the top of, I think, really valuable resources. And then just following my curiosity, knowing areas that I wanted to explore when I was at the agencies, and maybe just didn't have a chance to because there was a client conflict or they weren't big enough. So I found that I really do like smaller groups who have a startup mentality. And if I can lend a creative marketing capability to an existing quasi agency team of folks, that's one sector. And also just, like athletes who aren't having brands, slam on their, knock on their doors, see if I can be a spark for them to kind of extract some more things about their personality or about their post-career aspirations. So it's finding those people through my network, and just through my own leads and curiosity. And then that's kind of how I pieced it together so far. It's a work in progress, but it's been pretty cool. Definitely been thrown a curveball with our current world. But I still really love the conversations with people who are just starting out in building their brand as a smaller company or as an athlete in a lower profile sport.
Well, hopefully, I mean, it seems like you've been able to hit the curveball relatively well this point, up until this point of your career. So I'm sure you're going to be just fine coming out of this and absolutely crushing it. And again, I think it's awesome now that you're really able to help some of these smaller brands. Last question, I guess, on that side, what's it like having to scale kind of your thoughts back a little bit, understanding before it's like, oh, AB InBev, I mean, they practically print money. Like, who's going to,
Yeah.
But beer is one of the number one selling things during all time, right? Whether it's good or bad. How do you try and lean down, I guess, these ideas, like, and make sure that a smaller company that might not have the millions of dollars of revenue or marketing can still be able to go out there and really make a difference within their communities and within their marketing efforts?
Yeah, I think that most good ideas do have elements of scale to them. So at a core level, I don't think the expensive idea isn't always the best idea, and oftentimes the most nimble idea can be the winner. But it is just knowing how far these smaller folks can go. I do feel confident that I can still give them a really creative, fun, interesting way to connect with their fans without spending a lot of money. I'll go back to Cleveland, for example. This is an example at Weber Shandwick, but there's a similar giveaway with Tums when LeBron James left. So Tums committed to giving free antacid to fans who are suffering heartburn. It wasn't really an expensive idea. It didn't capture the attention of the nation like the Victory Fridge did, but it did really own the local conversation for a bit of a life cycle. It made fans excited. Required no official affiliation with LeBron. It required no real upfront spend. It was just an announcement that we're going to do this thing. And I also think that you can be responsible, but still, when a client sees an idea gain momentum, they tend to find more money than you thought they had. And they'll double down and invest in that.
I love it. Josh, this has been absolutely incredible. Josh Green, creative marketing and earned media specialist, inventor, creator of Philly, inventor, creator of the Bud Light Victory Fridge. Josh, this has been incredible. Thanks so much for your time, man.
Thank you. It was great.